Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first in the three-part series on the economy and change. It's hosted by Sport Wellington. This series will provide you with an insight really into what we can expect to experience in the next few months and years, and providing you with information that will hopefully lead you to be proactive and adapting to the changing environment that we're finding ourselves in today. So today we're joined by Brad Olsen. Brad's a senior economist from Infometrics and the leading economic commentator across New Zealand. He focuses on getting useful information to businesses, decision makers and the public. At present, he's focused on the economic effects of COVID-19 and the reimagination of the New Zealand economy, which is really pertinent for all of us right now. Brad's risen to be one of New Zealand's more prominent and youngest economic commentators, regularly featuring across TV, radio, print and online. Brad's part of the forecasting team, analysing the latest trends and looking at how the economy is shifting. And in 2019, Brad co-authored the Regional Wellbeing, a broader view of community outcomes around New Zealand, Infometrics report, and has designed the Regional Wellbeing Framework, allowing local leaders in their communities to better understand how their area functions and design innovative actions to improve the well-being of the wider community. Outside of work, Brad's really busy. He's an active and engaged member of the Wellington community and is currently New Zealand's youngest Justice of Peace. He's also a member of the Global Shapers Community Wellington Hub, Wellington City Youth Council, the Citizens Health Council, advising the Capital and Coast DHBs, the Asia New Zealand Pacific Leadership Network, and the Wellington District Licensing Committee, and volunteers with Take 10. In 2016, he was announced as New Zealand's Queen's Young Leader and has met the Queen on 3 occasions. So welcome, Brad. It's great to have you with us today. And man, what a full life you lead. What drives you to do all
Look,
this?
I must say that makes me want to revisit the bio that I'm sure is on the Infometrics page at the moment. Definitely need to trim that down. Look, I think, Mark, honestly, the big driver for me at the moment and with all the other work I do is trying to get the best outcomes for other people. And certainly, what I'm hoping to do on this call is just provide a bit of, I guess, background context and a bit of a forward-looking view of where the New Zealand economy is likely to move. Now, to be honest, what I'm going to tell everyone today is probably nothing that they haven't heard before, but hopefully it gives them a bit more of a framework to both understand what we're currently seeing, but also consider what to do in the future. Very much at the moment, we are in uncertain times. We're seeing some big changes in the economy. And in my view, I guess this is about trying to get good information through to decision makers, big and small, so that when everyone is adjusting their plans, thinking about where to go in the future, they've got just a little bit more behind them to help assess those changes.
Yeah, I think that's really pertinent for us too in the sector that we're across in the sport and recreation sector is, the forward thinking now that people are starting to do needs to be front of mind as well. We've come through changing times over the last 4 months, but we've also, I think even previous to that, I think people have known there's things that we can always do better. And I think we don't want to lose this opportunity that we've got right now. And I think this today is going to be a really cool insight really about the impact the economy will play and helping future frame up decision making and things like that. So really looking forward to this discussion today, Brad. And I think as New Zealanders, we've all been through this really extraordinary 4 months, where we live our lives, how we've lived our lives, and they've been impacted really on the decisions that New Zealand government has taken, ensuring, that what is best for New Zealand and obviously for the citizens. And thankfully, it has had the intended impact of eliminating COVID from our country. But now we are, as we just said, we are transitioning into a new phase where we do need to respond and adapt to the implications of these decisions. The government's poured a massive investment into the recovery. And, I guess that it's invested billions that they've put into there. So, how will COVID-19 affect the New Zealand economy?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing that we need to be quite clear about is this is huge. And I think everyone understands that, but the reference point for me is we look at the last big economic shock that New Zealand faced. That was the global financial crisis around about a decade ago. Now, you've got to remember there that we saw 6.7% unemployment. That was the peak. And it took us until December last year to move from 6.7 down to 4%. So, a long time, a decade nearly for 2.7 percentage point change. The other thing, of course, is I guess just what the factors are that drive this. And this is the thing I personally struggle with quite a lot as an economist is that we often look to what has previously happened and try to assess, how similar or different is a new crisis. You've got to remember though, Mark, the last few economic crises we've had in New Zealand have been economically driven. They've been driven by some sort of change in the economic structure or coming through from financial markets. COVID-19 is a pandemic. It is a health issue first and foremost, and that requires some very, very different thinking, because you can't just stimulate the economy like normal, because you have health issues to bear in mind. You've got health concerns, and I guess the point to make as well is, if you look across the world and if you compare it to the last big pandemic we had globally, which was the 1918 Spanish flu, every economy gets hit by a pandemic. The question becomes, do you have a smashed economy, or do you have a smashed economy and a lot of body bags? And I think that's why New Zealand has gone through this as well as possible in many respects, because we have kept the health implications as low as possible in terms of how that is reverberated out for Kiwis. What I think we need to keep in mind as well is that there are some big structural changes coming through this. We're expecting that we could well see unemployment peak at around 10%. That is sort of a little bit more towards what we saw in the late 90s, after a massive restructure coming through the 80s in New Zealand, changing away from producing butter, which we sent over to the UK, and some very, very strong protections and subsidies coming from the government. So that I think is the big change that we haven't quite grappled with yet. We've gone through the last few months. That was the response to the economic crisis. And look, we had we've had a massive reduction in output. We were locked down for a month. We're only starting to get back on our feet really now. And a few things have changed. One of the big drivers of New Zealand's economic activity over the last decade is gone for the apparent future, and that's tourism. That's 5% of GDP, but around 10% of employment. As well as that, though, and again, just trying to, I guess, fill out that wider picture before we start zooming in, we've also lost, or we're likely to be losing, a lot of migration flows that we've previously had. Now, over the last 5-10 years or so, we've had a lot of people that have come into New Zealand, and for every additional person we get in New Zealand, they, of course, spend some money. That has been a really key driver of our activity, of the amount of spending that has gone around in the economy. So we're losing some of the fundamental drivers that we've relied on in the past. So with all of that, there's a dirty word in our office, and we call it unprecedented. It's unprecedented times, and that's just not allowed. But I do think that gives you an idea of just how different this sort of crisis is. In many respects, we're still yet to see this fully play out. And if we look even in the next sort of 6 months or so, we saw an immediate jump in unemployment coming through the lockdown. We had, I think, 40,000 people odd who lost their jobs in the first month. That was just the reaction, though. You've got to remember that was 40,000 jobs when the government was pouring billions into supporting 70% of businesses. So those were jobs that were simply never going to be viable moving forward. But at the moment, we've also got, and I guess this is the point I'll sort of stick with, and then I'm sure we can move on to the other questions, because I know there are a few, Mark. But if I talk to a lot of people out there, I've been getting a lot of emails recently saying, look, the economy is starting to look better. What's up with that? Is that true, or is that something different? And I sort of am saying to people, well, look, we're in level 1. We are starting to get more back towards normal. But at the same time, we've got 60% of the workforce who is currently government supported. And over the next few weeks, we've got 400,000 to 500,000 Kiwi workers who go from government supported and protected to possibly not. And so if in many respects, we are in the lull before the storm. There is a lot of water to still come under this bridge. But the thing I want to focus on here is that this is going to take a long time to go through. Essentially, we're expecting the economy to remain soft or in decline for the next year or so, and only then will we then start to pick up. In our minds, it takes around about 3.5 years for New Zealand's economy just to get back to the same level of activity as we saw prior to COVID. Now, that gives you just, I guess, a bit of magnitude, a bit of a time scale. Now, look, that's pretty doom and gloom. It's pretty hard times. But what I do think we've got here is, people often say, look, don't waste the opportunity of a crisis, and that's a little bit hard to digest. But I think the way I read that is we have to make adjustments at the moment to fit the new normal. Therefore, let's not just make the bare bones adjustments. Let's make sure that we are as well positioned for the future, and that does bring some big opportunities, huge challenges, but still quite a lot of opportunities for New Zealand.
Yeah, and I think, the point you're making there, this is the opportunity really to actually start to think differently and forward with it. And I think that's when we're looking into our local economy. So if we move into the Greater Wellington region where we are here now, from the research that you guys have been doing, I guess, is what are we looking at in terms of for the local economy here, and what do you see us being up against? Yeah, I get we get the picture that I think we are in this lull, and I think it's important that we do actually address this with the general public that, hey, there is more to come, but what could this actually look like? So yeah, so from a Wellington perspective, what are you seeing and thinking? Where's the thinking going at the moment?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think some people immediately jump on the idea that Wellington has this very strong government sector and therefore everything's hunky-dory. Now, certainly Wellington as a region is not going to be as hard hit as other areas. You look at something like the West Coast, Otago, those areas are going to get hit quite a lot harder because they have much more of a concentration of tourism activity. Some of those big changes are likely to be felt more in those areas. You've got to remember though as well that Wellington, I guess, it's not going to avoid this. It's probably just not going to take quite as big of a hit. We're expecting, I think, 9% decline in GDP and unemployment to fall. Employment to fall at around about 8% GDP fall, 9% employment. I'd expect, again, Wellington will be slightly below that for both of them. You're probably sort of talking 7% GDP, 8% odd employment. But the changes I think that we're going to see there are going to be a lot more based around how sectors respond. So if we look out over the wider upper, of course, there's a much stronger primary sector focus, meat, horticulture, dairy, all of those sort of angles. They are going to fare better. Now, again, not saying they're going to perform super well, but they're probably going to perform better than a lot of our other sectors. If we look at some of the more urbanised centres on the other side of the coast, particularly Wellington City, there are some issues there, particularly around international education. It's a big earner for parts. We're not going to see quite as much money coming in. We've also got this real tension at the moment around, look, you and I and everyone else here has been working from home for a few weeks. And some of us have really enjoyed it. Personally, I love the office. I'm a social person, but a lot of people I've talked to really, really enjoy that work from home. And that means that Wellington City, with a huge amount of workers, but a lot of people who actually live out in Porirua or the Hut or Kapiti, for example, there's a really different, I guess, dichotomy coming through there where Wellington, from an employment point of view, probably isn't likely to shed as many jobs, but the people and where they're located and therefore where they're spending is in a very different place. So Wellington probably better positioned than most, but the drivers are going to be quite different. I think what we also need to recognise is that while we are going to see job losses decline, job numbers decline across the country, we're also going to see Wellington, which has a lot of a focus on providing some of those bigger core skills, those bigger services to other businesses. If they're losing customers, if I'm an accounting firm and I'm only servicing 10 companies instead of 20, well, of course, I'm going to need fewer staff. So all of those changes are going to be quite big moving forward. I'm just going to see if I can mute. I think it's John. There we go. Cool. Just had a little bit of feedback there. So those differences are going to play out. I guess the big thing as well that we've got to remember is, we talk 8, 7, 9%, all of those things. This is real people. And there are going to be some really big, I guess, social changes that we see, particularly because in my mind, we don't have a huge amount of job numbers coming back in the next year or so. So for a period, there's going to be a lot of people who are out of work. And I think it's also important to recognize that, in a sense, COVID's unemployment doesn't discriminate. There is going to be a wide range of people from low-skilled to high-skilled jobs who are going to be all of a sudden out of work. And that's going to bring some very different changes through for households. The big change, I guess, is that people are going to just simply have less money. And that I think is probably important to realise, that disposable income goes down. Moving forward, we've got people who are going to be out of jobs, but there's also going to be people working fewer hours or having to take some sort of pay cut possibly. All of that says, look, the amount of money going into a household is lower, but they're also having to still meet some of their costs. So they've still got to, pay power, pay the internet, pay for food and rent and such. Those sort of changes mean that the amount of money left over for the likes of tourism or other recreation activity is often lower. So a bit more of a search, I suspect, from households wanting to find a good bang for their buck when they're looking at how much money they've got left over every week.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I guess when we're looking at policy, financial decision making, quite often, a lot of the things that we're doing today is guided by, say, Treasury's living standards framework, and that in some ways about the resilience of the nation to be able to around some of these policies and the impact that they're having. And some of the things you've been talking about there, Brad, I think is really important. That's probably relatable to that. And I just got a question, really. Why is it important, that any sector, I guess, and we'll talk especially maybe around sport and recreation, and to those working with youth, align themselves with living standards frameworks?
Two broad answers there. The first one from a classic economist, because it pays. And I say that in the sense that, look, if you want to start securing money from the government and you can, or from other organizations, and you can prove that there's not only a financial benefit, but there's wider spin-offs, then that often will make your application or similar look just a little bit better. So there's an incentive there, if you will. But I think, and again, this comes back to that we're talking about real people here, that there is actually a real benefit in making sure that the right support and the right I guess initiatives come into play to support New Zealanders moving forward. If we look, for example, and look, we've noted people are going to lose jobs. Now, we could well give people the dole and just let them sort of sit at home for a while. If we look at the way that Treasury looks at its four capitals, you've got natural, you've got sort of financial, physical, you've got human, and you've got social. Now, if you look at just giving people money, that keeps their sort of their financial stuff going. Sure, it's not easy to live on the dole, but they've got money, if you will. What I think that often there's sometimes a simplistic view that you sort of give people to money and everything's fine. Actually, we've got to remember these are real people. They're complex humans at the end of the day. And one of the things I'm getting worried about is that if we're going to have, 10% unemployment, if we're going to have these people out of work without the opportunity to get back into employment within a year, we're going to have to find some unique ways of repositioning people. What we often find is that if we have people that are out of jobs for too long, they often lose what we call those work-ready skills. They're not as able to get up, at 9 o'clock in the morning. They often lose motivation, the ability to sort of, have a sense of purpose. And all of that is really devastating from a personal point of view, but also from a sort of a community and societal point of view. Now, if we look at something like the sports and rec sector, I think there's actually a huge opportunity here to realise that there are a lot of people who are going to have a bit more spare time, but also something that they are going to A, want to enjoy, and B, I guess, coalesce around. They're going to want to sort of join up and be around something that makes a difference, that they sort of feel a part of. And in that view, I suspect that there's a human capital element from that point of view, from a personal sense. You're keeping active, you're keeping fit, you're keeping engaged, you're keeping, but as well as that, you're also meeting that sort of social point of view where you're keeping social, you're keeping connected, you've got a sense of purpose. So I guess what this does in a purely financial point of view is it actually makes things cheaper. In a sense, because we don't have to pay for longer for more services for people. We actually sort of stump up the money in the first instance and we keep people going, but also from a human point of view, we actually keep people engaged, and there is a real strong societal pull. Again, noting that we are going to have quite a number of people who are out of work or who are, certainly at the moment in very uncertain times. That is the sort of point where people flock towards known things or things that take their mind off the doom and gloom of every day. And I think something like sports and recreation actually has a huge part to play in there. And even in other times, I think you've seen, or I've certainly seen personally, the rise in how important, being sociable and being active is. The number of times I've been invited to try and play social netball or something is huge. I haven't quite got my skill set together yet, but those sort of things are going to be quite big moving forward.
I think so. The point you're making really there is that sport and rec has a really great opportunity to put itself out there as something that is going to give people a purpose, and to actually keep themselves active, but also even more so to actually self-empower themselves, to actually take action and do things. So many of the things that we would talk about around the values of sport is so important in that sense. But
absolutely.
There's a real situation though, isn't there, out there where, like you mentioned before, that it's hard for people sometimes to get motivated because they can't see that sense of purpose. Here at Sport Wellington, we are concerned with the low participation communities, that the vulnerable and the marginalised type people. But how best is it to respond to these communities during these times, do you think?
Look, I think it's hugely important because often it's these communities that are sort of left behind first. If we look and look, I say this as the 23-year-old here, young people are feeling the brunt of this downturn in the first instance. Over the last few weeks, we've seen, I think, the increase for those under 30 across the country was something like a 57% increase for under 30s who've lost their jobs. At the same time, for 30 to 64-year-olds, it was 35 odd percent. So a much larger cohort of young people who've probably only just got a job in many senses are now back out without the same ability to earn money. I think as well as that, though, if we look at, okay, what do we actually need to do here? Because it's all good and well saying, well, we need to, work with marginalised communities or those who are typically hard to do. But look, Mark, I mean, we all knew that, it's not a new problem. Now, I'm not going to say I've got any sort of silver bullet solutions, but I do think what we've seen over the last few weeks, the last few months, is two things. The first one is that actually going into the grassroots and getting local communities operating is important. And I think, for something like sports and recreation, there is value in having both structure, but sometimes also not a lot of structure to try and get people motivated. As well as that, though, and this is something that, from my personal point of view, is actually really an exciting opportunity, is needs must, right? We've seen some big changes in the last few weeks, people having to work from ironing boards. I was telling you that, earlier. And I say that because people are going to adjust because they have to. And from a sports and recreation point of view, and from a general sort of social interaction point of view, people are just going to do things. They're going to give things a crack. And look, half the time it's going to work in some way, shape, or form. And so I think being open to really quite new and radical ideas is going to be important because, and I've said this a number of times, we are going to have to reimagine how the economy works. We haven't had this period of a huge amount of people out of work for an extended period. We haven't had this fundamental change in the structure of the economy, where some jobs that used to be, very, very easy to fill simply no longer exist. So the way we have to redeploy and rethink our workforce and the way that people operate is huge. And I think that's the challenge here is trying to understand how to best meet that need. The opportunity as well is giving, I guess, enough space for those new ideas, those new changes to come through.
And it's interesting that then, so equally, if we look at the higher socioeconomic communities that we have, and that's probably where that can actually play together to help each other to actually grow. And is that some of the thinking that you would say? So, again, this period, how's that going to impact, or what is the impact that these higher socioeconomic communities could have through this period as well?
Yeah, I think they're really big, and I think it's also what we need to consider here is how we redevelop or reimagine the delivery, if you will, or the structures that sports and recreation is delivered under. And there's a huge range of things there. One, of course, from a local government point of view, is the provision of resourcing of sports centres, of sports fields, and those bits and pieces. Skate parks, even just our natural built environment. But I think also there is that sort of structural change that comes in, and I say that in terms of, look, do you have to visit different areas to get people involved in sports and recreation? Do you have to think about the timings? Everyone used to do, I don't know, a Wednesday. When I played soccer, for example, it was always a Wednesday evening soccer training and then a Saturday morning game. If you've got people unemployed and those changes, can you just have sort of social meetups, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 12 on the field? And I say that I know they're sort of simplistic examples, if you will, but they are changes in how we work. And look, I say that, Mark, because we can't just go back to what we've previously done. And that's a little bit of the worry from my point of view, is that people just imagine that everything goes back to normal. And I say that in the sense that, look, we haven't, if you look at professional sports, for example, we haven't gone, oh, well, look, we still can't get over to Australia or to South Africa, so there's no Super Rugby. We've gone, look, we'll keep a bit of a framework around, obviously, we play, games and we have a bit of a derby, but we'll do that just within New Zealand with Super Rugby Aotearoa. And I guess that's the thinking, that's a bit of the concept of the thinking I think we're going to have to embrace. How do we keep those structures similar, but adapt them for the new environment we're operating in? And that's just one example, but those changes, that tweaks around the edges is going to be important to how we deliver functions out to the community.
That's a great point. And it sort of leads me to this next area then where we're going to is, so what impact can we expect really to see from the government budgets, and specifically, I guess, with investment into the area of sport and recreation. And you've touched a little bit on people taking the initiatives themselves, but yeah, what would you be thinking there?
Well, look, there's obviously a lot of money to go around in a sense, and that's a good and a bad thing. We've seen, I think it was a sort of $200 to $300 million announcement come out from the sports minister in recent times. And look, Grant's still got, I think, $20 billion left of the COVID recovery and response fund. Now, I say that again with a bit of caution, but also an opportunity. On one hand, there is money to go around. On the other hand, everyone wants the money. So there's going to be a lot of competition to try and secure that funding. What I do think is important, and for the likes of sport and recreation, is similar in my mind to how the likes of arts and creative sector is likely to move, is you've seen some investments coming through. You had $83 million coming through for the short term, $104 million for a bit of a rebuild and reimagining models, and $78 million for innovation. And that's just in the sports and rec center, sort of sector. The challenge, I think, is going to be realizing that this is not an ongoing pool of money. In many senses, this is the biggest injection that the sector might see for a while. And it's important that, one, you recognize that it might not be ongoing, but two, that you do enough with it. So it's not just getting you back towards normal, but it's setting you up for the future. And I think that's the thing. Looking at investing and redeveloping ideas is going to be quite important as we move through this. The focus as well, I guess, from the government's funding is that they want to make sure that activity gets back to normal, but also that we start to, where possible, solve some of the issues we've always identified, but they've always been a little bit in the too hard basket, or we weren't making enough progress. And I say that because, again, Grant Robertson's talked about if your house is burning down, you wouldn't build it back the same way. And I guess when we think about redeveloping the blueprint for the house, it's going, well, look, we always knew, that hallway was just too long and the kids were too far away from mum and dad. So actually, when we build it new, we'll put those rooms closer together. I say that in the sense that you couldn't do that when the house was still standing. It was too hard. Now, when you have to rebuild, you have to reshape, you have to reimagine, that's where you can do some of those things. And the focus, I think, from government's been quite clearly on how do we redevelop and make sure we're bringing everyone on this journey. How do we bring in some of the different groups? How do we bring in young people? How do we bring in Māori? How do we bring in women? And I think for something like sports and recreation, there's also a big need to focus on what are both the progression pathways, if you will, for people who are engaged in the sector, but also recognizing that there is a continuum, if you will, between people like me who are super lazy and would love to get involved with sports, but don't know my two left feet from each other, through to very professional athletes, if you will. And I say that in the sense that there is quite a range of people, and there's no one size fits all change that comes through this. Age ranges, skills, interest and all of those different challenges are going to be important to grapple with as we get that money in and re-evolve and reimagine.
Yeah, and I guess that's the exciting part for us that are in the industry, is that we see that there is a great opportunity. And exactly, I love your analogy. If your house did burn down, you definitely wouldn't rebuild it the same way. And I think this is the point where we're at right now. When we're looking at the economic downturn, how long are we looking at? What's the length of time that you'd be thinking?
Yeah, look, in my mind, it's around about at least sort of a year to 18 months of pretty soft activity. So people may likely have heard, talk about V or U-shaped recessions, and that essentially the starting point was a V-shaped recession. And that's where you have a very sharp downturn in activity, but you very quickly slide up the other side to sort of back, relatively fast. With a U-shaped recession, you have activity that goes low and then sticks around at that low point for a while. And we're expecting it's going to take sort of 6 to 9 months for us to hit that low point, and then we're going to stay at that lower position for the next sort of year or so before eventually regaining. And so again, 3.5 years to get us there. Now, the way I demonstrate this, if you will, is that during the global financial crisis as well, just because, a lot of us remember that and remember how painful it was, New Zealand it took us 3.5 years to bring back 60,000 jobs. New Zealand's already lost 50,000 jobs in a month. And we are still, in many respects, still at the beginning, and we're still going to see a lot more people who are going to lose jobs. So if it took us 3.5 years to add back that many jobs back in the GFC, I guess that points towards a much slower return towards any sense of normal. Now, again, when you lose such a huge amount of capacity, there is the ability to bounce back a little bit faster, just because big drops allow big rises. But I guess, want to caution that this is going to be sticking around for a while. And look, I've repeated this a number of times, but I'll say it again. It's not going to be the same. We don't just bounce back and in 5 years' time, New Zealand in 2025 is looking the same as it was at the end of 2019. We're not going to have tourism that comes back to the same degree. We're not going to have as many people in some of our retail and hospitality offerings. We're likely probably to see more people in the likes of sort of tech and education. So some structural changes coming through there, as well as where people sort of work and live. We could well see a bit more of a focus on people moving out of our urban centres, sticking around and remote working from more regional parts of the country. So some big challenges to grapple with there in terms of not only how long, but how widespread this change is going to be.
And I guess you've touched on this a bit around the service sectors. They're going to be affected massively by this. But looking a little bit, something you did talk about earlier was learnings, I guess, that we can take from disasters that we've had previously. And you mentioned the Great Depression and the economic downturn. How can we actually apply these new learnings to what's happening now from those?
Yeah, I guess it's keeping our wits about us and looking and trying to compare what, like you say, what's worked and what hasn't. Now, if we look at something like, and one of the things I'm grappling with at the moment, if you look at the Spanish flu of 1918, the first wave was actually pretty small in comparison. It was that second wave that came through and got people. So although New Zealand has, of course, managed to eliminate COVID-19 for the minute, we've also heard from the Prime Minister that we are likely to have more cases, and the question then becomes of how well we can contain them, but also recognising that our connections with the wider world are likely to be curtailed for a significant period moving forward. I don't know of any major disease or virus that we've managed to get a vaccine coming through quickly on, so we've got to remember that. As well as, look, the numbers globally are still rising at quite a rapid pace. The likes of South Africa, their numbers aren't supposed to peak till September at this point. And although you're starting to see numbers in the likes of the UK and Europe start to soften, numbers in the Americas in general are still ticking up. And that they're now sort of spreading into more Latin America and then into Africa. And again, I guess that highlights that we still have a lot of time to play out here to actually, I guess, move through this. So some big challenges there, and I guess noting that keeping an eye both on New Zealand but on the wider perspective is important. Probably the most critical one, though, is if we look at both the likes of the Great Depression and the GFC. Now, in both of those, there were periods where governments and organisations took that austerity approach of cut spending, cut everything, batten down the hatches. Now, battening down the hatches is important. Cutting out spending actually is probably a great short-term move that provides much longer-term issues. In many respects, the only reason that the world got out of the Great Depression back in the 1930s is because we had a world war. And I don't really think that's the option we want to go with today. So I guess what we need to be looking at now is how do we keep our businesses going? How do we keep operations moving and continuing to invest in the future while also making sure that a business is viable? Now, again, I'm not saying everyone should go out and hire 20 new people or bring on a whole lot more equipment now. It's also going, look, how can we keep operations as stable as possible for as long as possible? And when conditions come back, when activity is starting to trend back towards normal, that we get people investing sooner rather than later. So I guess in many respects, looking at those challenges that we've faced in previous times, it's recognizing that we do have to keep our wits about us. We do have to be ready for the future. But I think probably the most important one is we will come through this simply because we have to. And that actually the focus for many people is if we continue to invest in our people, then we get good returns out of them. And that's probably the fundamental message is this is going to be tough, but we will get through it.
Yeah, and hence the whole area around hope and sense of purpose to what people have got in their lives is key messaging that we can all take forward to encourage everyone to bring us all through this together. Yeah. Just lastly, again, you mentioned it before that the government put $250 million into sport and recreation over the next 4 years. And it is like a once in 50-year opportunity to refresh and do things with it. Just to put you right on the spot, I guess, what should sport and recreation do with it? Just straight up, there's a short answer.
I think I'm trying to think on the fly. I think what I would do is try and figure out what parts of your models work at the moment and therefore can do with investment, but also be a little bit ruthless in terms of, look, what wasn't working but was always seen as, that was part of the model. Figuring out how to change it. Look, I think of cricket, if you will, that you could never change away from a test, and I say that my boss, massive cricket fan, very much a purist. I love a bit of T20, and so I think finding out actually how do we change away from those models that we always thought were important, but actually might not be a fit for modern day New Zealand. So being a little bit ruthless will be important, because again, you've got one shot with this money. You either make it count or you waste it. And I think it's important that as much as possible, we figure out what works, but also what doesn't.
Yeah, Brad, thank you so much for that. It's great advice, really, and it's things that us in the sport industry are really sort of trying to get our heads around a lot, as to some of the changes, the opportunities we have. But I think the optimism that you've been painting as well is something that we should all really focus on as well together. And it's been great just to get that insight of your expertise and knowledge that you've had over the period of time.
The other thing, Mark, sorry,
yeah.
just to add in there, because I say this because of I say be ruthless. I guess I say that as well because if we look at it, we're going to have to make some fundamental changes. They're already very tough decisions, and if in many respects there's no good options. And I think people being realistic that in a previous time you wouldn't have made decision XYZ because it was too hard, it was too uncomfortable. Well, actually the opposite is sort of in effect now, that everything is uncomfortable, everything is painful, and you're trying to look sort of to smash through as quickly as possible to move forward into that sort of that reimagined space. So it probably now more than ever is the time to take risks, because the risk of it going bad, well, that's already happened. So you can be a little bit more flexible in your approach.
That's great advice too. I can totally see that. Hey, we've got a few questions I think that's come through, so I just bring colleague Megan into it now. So Megan, would you like to pose some questions?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Mark. Hi, Brad. We've had one come through that was submitted with registrations that asked there's quite a bit here, so bear with me, but what role do women play in the recovery of the economy of sport? In most sports, women and girls is a huge opportunity area to increase membership. How do we get some quick wins in this area, and how do we maintain growth? How important is it to attract, recruit, and empower women in this next phase?
Yeah, so look, I mean, first things first, you got to recognise you're talking to the 23-year-old guy on the call. So I can't offer too many views on that one, but I think what is quite clear there is a need to recognise. I guess it's where can we change the model, and why have we always had issues in the past with getting women who not only get into sport but also stick around. I think of my sister. I was always on the sideline cheering on her netball games, that sort of thing. But it was something that very quickly she sort of grew out of, and there didn't seem to be a pathway to continue with sport. It was seen as something you only did in school, and then after that the functions cut out. You either had to sort of go a bit more professionally, or you didn't continue. And I guess, again, trying to figure out how we are best to provide new options and changed options for that delivery model. Again, is it times that need to change? Is it the competition style that needs to change? We can be a little bit more flexible. And I think also for something like these changes, we can, like I said, take a few more risks. Try it out. If it doesn't work, don't continue with it. But I think, we can try out those different models. We can give it a crack. And probably the last bit is, look, getting some more women to sort of give them the license to do that themselves. Too often I think that the settings that we have for a range of different things are set by the likes of people that look like me and other people, that we say, well, this is how it is, and work around it. In fact, like I say, we've got a lot of structures that are broken at the moment because of COVID. Instead of building them back the same way, what else can we change? So just trying to get as many people involved as quickly as possible, and giving as much freedom to change and reimagine and redesign without fear of failure is going to be quite important.
Awesome, thank you. We've got another one that's asked, from your perspective, what do you think might be the priority areas where the Wellington recreation and sports sector could work together in responding to and recovering from COVID? Dare I say it, working together to prepare for possible outbreaks and movement up and down alert levels?
Yeah, so I think two things there. The first one is obviously, look, for people like me who love to watch but can't participate in sport because we've sort of, or recreation in general, because, well, we're a little bit hopeless at it all. I think there's an important thing here around sort of events and community culture. People are looking for things to do. They are looking for enjoyment and entertainment. And I think that there's a big focus there in the near term of how we get a little bit more of a focus, not only on some of our big professional sort of sports and recreation opportunities, but different elements out there in the community. The more important one, though, particularly if we look at moving up or down, COVID alert scales, or just that reimagination in general, is we're going to have a lot of people out of jobs. We're going to have a lot of people, like everyone I've talked to at the moment, still facing a very uncertain future. Providing something that takes their mind off that and also has that ability for, I guess, changes to come in and a sense of purpose to be fulfilled is going to be important. So I wonder if, community teams or similar, just getting a bit more activity going will be important.
Awesome. And I've just got one more at the moment in case anyone, if anyone does want to put one in the chat. But how might we best collaborate and bring diverse sectors together? So looking at the private sector, public sector, and the community to advance mental, physical, and social well-being.
Yeah, so a few things. First one is, look, it's always been hard to get different people in the room in previous times. There is absolutely no excuse anymore. We can all do Zoom and Teams meetings and similar. So in many respects, there's no longer a good excuse not to have those conversations. I think as well, moving forward, leaving that pride and the position that you might have held previously at the door is going to be quite important. In some respects, an economic crisis is a bit of a great leveler, and everyone is hurting in different ways, and remembering that everyone is hurting in different ways is important. I guess the big thing is you often have organizations that are looking for the quick wins, and in many respects, again, we might not have a lot of quick wins, but I think what we do have is that ability to go, look, what we've currently got, what we had previously imagined, it doesn't work anymore. So we have to find a different way. Again, needs must in many respects. And so I think for a lot of organizations, it's going, look, we're going to have to try something else. And again, if it doesn't work, well, no harm, no foul. We'll try another way until we find the right method. Because at the moment, the cost of not doing anything is higher than the cost of trying something out and failing.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Those are all the questions that we've had submitted.
Great, thanks Megan, and thanks Brad for those answers. And yeah, it's really quite inspiring just to listen to what you're bringing these together and the ideas that you're sharing with us. But Brad, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and thank you, for sharing your insights and knowledge with us all today. And we look forward to just keeping in touch with things, and as time goes by, and as we all do react and respond at pace and do things in different ways. And it's a great reminder just for us all that, yeah, we do need to think differently, but it's okay. And generally from most disasters, good things come, and people do react to get together. And we've seen that really, I guess, for New Zealand pulling together and actually getting stuck into trying to help eliminate COVID from this whole, from our country at the moment. So thanks again so much. We appreciate your time. To everyone else on the webinar, the second series will be advertised on our website, where we probably probe a little bit more into what some of these opportunities are and how they actually would impact the future. And for everyone also, thank you very much for your time today, and have a absolutely fantastic weekend. I guess if you choose to recreate and socialise a bit, just remember our hygiene standards that we've still got to keep up. We are in alert level 1. But yeah, have a great weekend everyone, and ngā mihi nui to you all. Thank you.